All right, hello everyone. This is Dr. Joel Rosen. I am the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, and I'm really excited to invite my guest, Dave Korsunsky. He is the CEO of headsup Health, and it's really exciting to talk about because we're going to be getting into a whole new way of healthcare. It's really a paradigm shift when you go as deep to figure out how much implications what Dave is doing and what he's bringing to the market is impacting. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about when you're suffering with an exhaustion fatigue problem, you can't focus, you can't concentrate, you crash in the middle of the day, you get a stressor, you don't handle it well, and it causes you to get panicky or overwhelmed, and you're not focusing, you're not concentrating, and you're just not doing well. And that's who we work with, Dave. That's our audience. And they go to the doctor and they don't get the validation that they're looking for. And they're looking for a whole new way to get their health better. And so anyways, that's what we'll talk about. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us, the people that are listening, just about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. So my name is Dave Korsunsky, and like yourself, originally from Canada. I was born and raised in Winnipeg, Canada, and I know you're from Toronto, so we've got that in common. And also similar to yourself, through different educational and career opportunities, I ended up in the United States, and I've been a technologist most of my career. So I've always been working on career things that are related to technology projects. And that ultimately got me to Silicon Valley, California, where I worked for some of the largest software companies in the world, which was amazing. But as many of the people listening can relate to, I started to get burnt out. And I was only 32 years old and really starting to go through some unpleasant symptoms related to just stress overload, adrenal fatigue, and just essentially it was frustrating for me because I didn't want to go down the pharmaceutical path. I knew there were better solutions out there. I really needed to change my lifestyle. That's what got me in that mess in the first place, was learning better techniques for managing stress. I was learning how to change my diet and come off a standard American diet to something that's much better for my health and longevity. So as an individual who spent his whole career engineering computer systems, I now had to find a way to apply the same to my health. And what I realized quickly was that for the average person out there, those tools don't exist. And I saw lots of technology out there that could measure one thing. I could measure my blood sugar with this thing. I could log into my doctor's office and see some of my blood work. I could use an app to track my food, but these were all just fragments of the larger picture. And in the technology world, that's what we call an analytics problem, which means lots of data that's not talking to each other. And that's an easy problem to solve in the technology world. So that's what I've set out to build at headsup Health, and I can go into more detail as we go further into the show, but at the core, that's my background and how I got into this and how it's evolved now into my full-time passion/obsession.
Which requires its own set of balances again too, right? So it's, now you get to actually data track what you have to learn to balance. But you said a lot of things in there, Dave, which I want to get into. And that the first is not really having the awareness of how life has impacted you over the course of your years, and realizing that you go to school or you get an education, you do your life, you do it for a certain amount of time, and we take our health for granted. And next thing you know, out of nowhere, which really isn't out of nowhere, which is as a result of, moment after moment, day after day, month after month, year after year, impacting your body adversely, and then starting to break down. And not everyone would have the initial insight that you had, where maybe they didn't want to go the pharmaceutical model. They did want to go it. They did what they were told to and what they should have done. And, right?
That's what you're supposed to do. And in this day and age, you go to the doctor and you take the pill and you follow the procedure. Yeah. So yeah, some people I can understand that would be their first line of thinking. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, and so there's that whole aspect. But if they're listening to this, they're obviously made a crossover and they're aha of, okay, well, I got to do something different. For me, I was always the rogue. I was always the black sheep. I was from a traditional family that's all you did, and
Hmm.
I was the weirdo. My mom was a public
You look
health
like
nurse.
the weirdo, Joel, just so you know,
I am
brother.
I am the
Yeah.
weirdo, right?
Yeah.
So, but the caring weirdo, and
Of course.
so they went into the school system and immunized kids. That's what they did. And so I got to have as much as I needed and more.
Yeah.
And so anyways, but you had the insight to, okay, I'm not getting anywhere. I want to be able to learn how to do this myself. And then the most interesting part of all of that is bringing the analytic mind to be able to see these bunch of numbers that don't relate to each other, that don't really make a difference on my health. And now we can integrate that. So with that in mind, well, let's say we're coming from the person who didn't have the insight. They were doing what the doctor told them, and it's not working. I just feel sicker. I feel like the medications, like the antidepressants or the anxiety medications, actually make me feel worse. Maybe it was working in the beginning, but now it's not working. And ultimately, I'm taking these things, and I still feel brain foggy. I still have anxiety. I still don't sleep. I still don't thrive. I still don't enjoy my life, and I still have problems. And yet, I'm still taking more medication. So let's take it from that point of view. From, okay, well, what do I do with this information, and what's this information you're even talking about?
Yeah, well, I think the best way to think about the answer to this question is starting to become your own detective. And so for me, what that meant was, okay, I'm not a medical guy. I don't know what all these tests mean. And I'm sure a lot of people listening, they may be intimidated, especially by a lot of the blood tests. But I knew enough that I could line them up in a spreadsheet and just look at the numbers together. And so for me, I started seeing some patterns in there that were missed by the doctor because they didn't have access to all of this information. So that was the first step for me, was just starting to look for some patterns in my own data. And I think everybody's case is unique. And as I'm sure you have experienced, we all have to look at this as a detective problem. And it's actually kind of fun once you get into it and start learning how to collect some basic numbers. For me, it was just, okay, let me see what's going on here with my thyroid markers. I'm not a doctor, but I know that I had some thyroid issues. So I was able to look at my thyroid numbers over like 5 or 7 years and start to see when it started going in the wrong direction. And then as individuals now, we have access to vast amount of information. So I just started listening to some really good health podcasts. And there's some amazing ones out there. Really, really luminary people. And again, not needing to be a medical professional, just starting to listen to some good, solid podcasts. There's probably 5 you and I could rattle off right now that are like some of the best podcasts out there on functional health. And so just starting there, listening to a few podcasts. And when you start hearing this stuff, that especially for people who are maybe depressed, or they're not depressed, but they've lost the motivation to work on this. They've been sick for so long. It's like, Jesus, I'm tired of this. But when you start hearing these things, that can start to re-energize you. Wow, there's people out there that are winning the battle. And I'm hearing it on these podcasts, or however you decide to consume information. So I think it's a combination. It's starting to find some podcasts you love that can give you some good hope and some good information. It's starting to measure a little bit, starting to become a detective. Okay, I can go get a Fitbit for $100 and start to make sure I'm getting lots of exercise. And am I getting to sleep at the right time? To have good, healthy circadian rhythm? And then it's coming to experts like you and saying, okay, doc, I've got some information here. I want to start doing some detective work on myself. And it's a process, definitely. But I think that's the best way I can explain it is, I hate to say it, but everyone has to be their own detective in this day and age, because whether it's environmental pollution, mold exposure, not knowing the difference between healthy and unhealthy foods. There's so many things out there that can get us into trouble that we have to start learning to become our own detective. My approach to that is to give people some data. And best analogy I can give you is, let's say you're buying and selling stocks, okay? And that's what you do for a living. If you're trying to figure out whether to buy or sell, you need to look at a lot of different data points. Oh, what are these analysts saying? How has Moody's rated this stock? What's their 52-week high? How has it performed again? So a trader is looking at all of this data, but what data does the average person have to analyze their health information? So the approach I'm bringing to the table is to give you some tools to make data-driven decisions about your health and help you become a detective, and then work with a master detective like Joel or like other functional doctors, because we need your help. We need your expertise. We need you to come to us and say, well, I think maybe we should look at some of these other functional tests that your traditional doctor didn't run. So yeah, I guess the best analogy for me is how can I give people some data to start becoming their own detective? That's what Heads Up Health is. You sign up, just start checking your blood sugar every morning for a few days and start to get your blood sugar into a healthy range and start to make sure you're getting some healthy sleep. So there's some really simple ways to get started. And it's a process of becoming a detective. So long-winded answer, Joel, I apologize, but it was a big question. So that's the best I can.
Whether or not the points that I was making along the way in my head can all be recalled, but I do appreciate everything that you said. So the way I look at it is, we started with, what about that person who doesn't know but knows now they have to figure something out? And we were saying, okay, it's time to become your own detective, your own advocate. No one is going to care about your health as much as you're going to care about your health. Yes. And that's where you don't have to apologize for saying, I hate to say it, that you have to become your own detective. There's nothing to hate about that. I'm very vigilant with my words when I talk to my demographic of people that are losing the battle, Dave, and they're exhausted and burnt out and tired. And I say, guess what? It really is war. Every single day, man. Yeah, it's war. So, and what we're talking about is your health, and the victory is experiences. The victory is recapturing what you weren't doing before in life. That's the motivating drive. That's the why. Like, why do I want to do this, right? Absolutely. So if you're listening to this and you've had the epiphany of, okay, life sucks right now for me. I've gone to a lot of different doctors, or I've continued to go to the traditional route and it's not working for me. And I realize that I need to become my own detective. And that means I start to look at my important health points. And what's really great, Dave, is the people that will be interested in this is they don't have to do as much research in terms of setting up the parameters of, or the things to look at, because this program that you're building will give them insights and tools to be able to look at the most important things. And what's great about that is you can put the ranges in certain healthy functional ranges versus laboratory ranges and start to see trends. And it, you know what, it does become exciting, because when you start to see things that no one else has seen before, or at least have told you there's nothing wrong with you. Dave, I have people, I've said this many times, that will cry during our conversation, our consultation. And I know why they're crying, and I ask them why they're crying, and they'll say, because no one's ever told me that I have anything wrong with me before. It's always been normal, or my blood pressure has been a little high, or, you know, my cholesterol is a little bit high, but nothing that really explains why I have so much fatigue and why I'm so cold and why I can't, you know, lose weight, or why I can't focus, or why I feel like crap. I mean, no one tells me this. So they become their own detective, and they're able to start to listen to different sources of information, which Heads Up health in its evolution, I'm sure, will start to be doing that, right? Giving people the insights and tools. What's your program and what's your goal for that with those that now want to get a little bit more involved with this and they're starting to see, hey, there's some real cool things here?
Well, we focus on giving people access to their personal health dashboard, and that helps them set up the numbers that matter and watch those carefully. We want to give people the tools to take that to any health expert they choose. So whether they decide to take that to someone like yourself or the nutritionist or their conventional medicine doctor. So from that point of view, we try to remain agnostic, and we really just want to focus on the numbers and give people the numbers. That's the one thing that we do best. Now, we do have our podcast where I like to interview people who are making some of the cutting edge technology out there. Who are the guys making the Oura Ring? Can we talk to them about that and help people understand what these numbers mean? Can I get Dorian, the founder of Keto Mojo, on the podcast? Okay, how do I understand those numbers? Can I get a microbiome expert on the show and say, well, how can I start to understand the health of my microbiome? Or can I get someone who understands genetics and say, okay, I ran my 23andMe, my Ancestry, and what should I look at? There's 50 pages of stuff here. So our podcast focuses on helping the everyday person demystify these numbers. And I think that's an important point, is don't be intimidated by these numbers. Everything's intimidating at first. Taking a tennis lesson is intimidating at first, okay? So looking at this data is no different. And you're gonna look at it and you're gonna get confused, and then you're gonna read about it, and then you're gonna learn a little more. So going through that process, I think, is just is part of it. So we focus on the numbers. We interview guys like you, we do the podcast, we write our own blogs, but really helping people understand the numbers. That's what we want to focus on.
Yeah, and it just kind of makes that light bulb go off in my head again, because that's where I said at the very beginning of the introduction, where you realize the implications that something like this does, because it's not just a way to accumulate numbers. It's a way to redefine how healthcare is practiced. And in terms of, well, listen, it can take 17 years for research to come out and actually be implemented and have a difference. But when we have the ability to not just provide you, the person who becomes the detective in their healthcare journey and sleuthing, so to speak, but we can also help the doctor make better decisions, and
Absolutely.
to be able to see the correlations with key numbers that are predictors of health. Insurance companies, I would imagine, would be interested, because now they can see how they can save money by not paying for as many procedures potentially, and be able to get the people that have insurance policies healthier at a cheaper rate, and be able to see these important numbers. On top of that, it can really influence on how the medical system actually studies healthcare conditions, and reverse engineer, hey, if this letter or this ratio or this whatever metric is related to this that causes better or worse things, let's reverse engineer that and see how that impacts an epidemic of immune dysfunction, or an epidemic of Alzheimer's, or an epidemic of type 2 diabetes, or it's common sense stuff, but it's not common sense stuff. And so have you, I know you and I have talked, but have you obviously, I guess, I had so many questions. Where do you plan to go with what kind of impact that something like this can have in that context, Dave?
Well, let's see here. Before I answer that question, I just want to set the context a little bit and say that when I'm advocating for people to become their own detective, what we're trying to do, what you're trying to do, what I'm trying to do, is help people understand which lifestyle modifications they need to make to address whatever condition. that they're dealing with. So what we're trying to do is just help you see which knobs and dials need to be turned in your specific case to get an outcome. Everyone in this day and age is dealing with some condition that's related to environment, heavy metals, poor diet. These are lifestyle diseases that we are dealing with in many cases. You know, sometimes there's a genetic component to that. But at the core, most of what we're dealing with are these diseases of civilization. They're lifestyle driven. So we just want to help people connect the dots. Whether they go to the conventional doctor, maybe that doctor can give them 15 minutes of their time as part of the billable insurance. If they work with a functional doctor like you, they can get 60, 90 minutes of quality time. But hey, that's not enough. Sometimes you have to do your own research. And just to illustrate this point, this is an extreme example, but I interviewed a woman on our podcast named Jillian Zolos, also up in Ottawa, Canada. You may know her. And her epileptic seizures were getting so bad that she was ready to pull the plug. She'd given up, defeated. And she started, luckily, she discovered a nutritional diet, the keto diet, that helped her get some reprieve. And then she had to do her own research on PubMed. She had to do her own religious tracking to figure out exactly what was causing her epileptic seizures. And she said something amazing on my podcast. She said, Dave, no doctor in the world has time to start looking on PubMed for research articles that may help you. Only you have to do it. So that's an extreme example for sure, but that's just in some cases what it takes. So I wanted to share that example of being your own detective. Now, in terms of where the software can go, this is my vision. And the vision is that we can connect to your genomic data. Let's say that comes from Ancestry.com or 23andMe. And we can connect to your lab test results, Quest Diagnostics, whatever, LabCorp, Mayo Clinic. We understand the lifestyle factors, blood sugar, heart rate, food logs, that type of thing. And then we also have access to the functional tests that can look for things like heavy metals, microbiome disruption. These are very, very complicated algorithms because you may need to be looking across 5 different types of tests where there may be very complicated ways to diet. Even the best practitioners in the world have a hard time with this because it's very complicated with all of the genetics and the microbiome and the blood tests. But that is where machine learning can come in. And we can program the system to automatically help surface these insights to the individual, to experts like yourself. So we can basically short circuit maybe decades of suffering before somebody finds the right practitioner who knows what the heck to look for. Oh, it's a genetic variant, and I see that in your urine metabolites, it's showing up here, and this is the recommended intervention. That could save someone decades of suffering if the software is pre-programmed to find that stuff. Maybe there's a handful of practitioners in the world who know how to look for that pattern and then even be able to order the right tests. So I think that's where I want to get to with this, is short-circuiting that suffering process, short-circuiting that process of finding the functional doc who knows exactly what to look for and can find your issue immediately. So that's what we want to get to longer term is the vision for this.
Yeah, really, really cool stuff. I would just say that Jillian should know that there is a doctor in the world that will go on to PubMed, because I've done it a lot of times for people that have had problems and looked into their health and see what the heck, because I
yeah.
doing it. So
yeah.
There's one
doctor.
doctor.
I know there are functional doctors who do that, but like, you know, to be researching and tracking and researching and tracking, it's a crap ton of work. And you're getting seizures in between. But you know what? She's seizure free and has been for decades after being on every frickin' anti-seizure med we have a name for. So there's always an answer. It's just, can we get people there?
Yeah, and you know, the other thing I would say though is I'll sort of play the other side of the coin where there are skeptics too, where they're like, well, number one, I don't like all my information being out there, and I don't like to have, like, a lot of people want to do their DNA under anonymous names. There's a
Sure.
concern. We're seeing that a lot.
Well,
We're
I
producing.
understand that concern.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a buddy of mine, Dr. John Thomas, and I are making a program, sort of your own follow along program, is sort of a user manual to understand the important SNPs. And I didn't even realize, but people are really, really fearful of that. So then on top of that, if I'm going to a platform that has my numbers that I can manually upload, there may be some concern for that. What would you say to those people in that regards?
Well, I think that's a personal choice that everybody has to make, and I
Right,
completely respect that choice. So
right,
if that's a concern, and maybe you do want to find some way to order a genetic test anonymously, there's people out there who have things that are very personal and private. And
right. I mean, as far as your data, like I'm going on to Heads Up Health and I'm uploading my own personal information, and there's some other, concierge services with like some, other boutiques, whatever. How is that? Like, I don't even know. And I'm sort of, if I put you on the spot with that, but and I agree with you. It's a personal choice for people. If your health is to the point, Dave, where you need life-changing procedures, like I tell people that are concerned about giving their DNA, don't commit a crime, and you won't get your DNA, coming back and haunting you because you didn't commit a murder and you had your DNA in a database. But as far as being able to really finagle your DNA, I don't know, like in this lifetime, how that would be able to happen. But anyways, as far as what would you say for people that like, well, if I upload this to Heads Up Health, is it my privacy being invaded?
well, we don't share the data with anybody. It's yours. And the
Right,
only way it's shared is if the person invites someone to access their data. Like
right,
I could invite Dr. Joel to access my data, but that's all user initiated. So that's the
right,
first question. And then
right.
the second part of that is like, man, I ran my nutrition genome data. That was probably one of the most valuable things I've ever done for my health.
Oh, for
Because
sure.
for me, it was like, okay, this was totally worth it. And I could start to figure out, I was able to connect some pieces that were impossible to connect before, like my methylation issues and
Right,
just issues related to mold and fungal and like why I'm predisposed to certain things. So for me, the genetic data was a game changer. And
right.
I understand that for some people it's sensitive, but it's a risk reward calculation that you need to do yourself. And if you don't want to do it,
For
great.
sure.
I'm here to help the people that want to put the data in and learn from it. And I respect people's privacy in our system. That's it.
Yeah. Well, you don't even, number one, if you don't have to do a genetic test to have the benefit of Heads Up Health, number one.
No, you can
Number
just
two,
put your blood
yeah,
tests in there and your
right.
weight, or you can put
Other
whatever you
time.
want in there.
Yeah,
We
you put
don't
it whatever
care.
you want. But I agree with you 100% where you have kids on a spectrum, and you want to be able to make profound changes. And I mean, the data is so much more important. But so let me ask you this then, because I find that there's different degrees of black belt, if you will. Like for those that are just getting into it, small changes could be huge improvements on their health. But and then you have like the person who's been everywhere and they've tried everything. And while I don't think you'll ever get to a point where I love your vision, and I think that'd be great to have, but there's just so many other variables that go into it. Like what's that person's perception of stress? How are they rewarded when they, their loved one knows that they're sick and they're actually being paid attention to, and they validate their condition based on the diagnosis. And there's other variables that the data doesn't track that, come together. So I agree that there's going to be certain variables that will never be 100% be able to track. And you've never really said otherwise. But I would say this though, for those that are really sick and have done a lot of different testing and genetic stuff and seen different specialists that don't really know how to put all the data together, this is the game changer at the deepest level, in my opinion, Dave. It really is. When you start to see those trends and those p-scores and those correlations that you don't see ever until you start to run those types of things, and you say, oh, I see this with this snip and this here, and these are the 5 basic things that you have to do no matter what's going on in your head and your relationship at home or whatever. These are the things that you got to do fundamentally that you need to do, and you see huge changes. And I think that's really awesome, and that gives your program so much power to get sick people healthy that have tried a lot of different stuff, and they're the toughest cases. It's easier, in my opinion. I don't get the easy cases anymore myself. You know, I would love to get the easy guys, and I don't get those guys anymore. So so let me ask you this, because I want to make it so that we can give a demonstration, because we could go so much deeper into the science of it. But so
let's make it real for people. So you and I planned this. So we wanted to introduce this concept. I'm sure a lot of people are having maybe a hard time conceptualizing what I'm talking about here. And let's dive into it on the show. We'll do a live demonstration. I'm going to fire up my Heads Up Health profile. Okay. So I'm going out on the line here. I'm going to share my data.
I'll share mine too. Although mine's not looking so great these days, I don't think.
Oh, well, you got to step up your game. Okay. You got a few days. So we decided we're going to do this on Tuesday, and that will be February 26th, 2019. It's going to be, what did we say? 6 p.m.
8 o'clock Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, and 5 p.m. Pacific time. And what we'll do is, just tell us what we're going to do. What are we going to demonstrate here?
Well, first of all, I want to just show people how they can start with some basics, because we've gone deep, and I want to really just back up the tape and show people how to just start simple. So that's the first thing. Is we're going to set up a blank profile, and we're going to say, here's 3 things you can start with right away that are going to make a big difference. So that's what we'll do. Get some ABCs down. And then we'll dive into my profile. I'll show you how I reverse engineered my maladaptive stress situation several years ago, what numbers I looked at, how my functional doctor helped me treat it. So we'll go through my personal story with my personal data. And then if you want to share some numbers, you can. And we'll give people some really simple ways to get started.
That's awesome. So what we'll do is we'll do this on my Facebook Live page, which is Adrenal Fatigue Recovery. I'll send you the link, so maybe you could send that off to other people so they can attend it. I'll put it on my YouTube, Your Adrenal Fix, and that will have the link to the live, and then we'll also record it for other people to be able to watch it again, because I think I'm so hook, line, and sinker in this, in terms of how valuable it is for people. And that's how I make all my decisions. Is this going to benefit people in this tool that they need to be able to make big changes? And the other thing, just as a preview, there's a lot of people in the group that are health coaches, and like yourself, I see a lot of people who've suffered and get themselves healthy, and then they want to share their passion and their experiences with their cohort or their people that they can help. And what's really great is what I'm using is the professional portal. Maybe you can give us just a little intro on that too, and maybe just talk a little bit about what Heads Up Health has in that way as well.
Yeah, for the health coaches out there, we've got our portal coming soon, and that will allow you to connect with your individual clients, and you'll have the 360-degree view of their health. And that will allow you to look at things like, okay, is this person got a healthy circadian rhythm? Can I help them get their sleep dialed in? Can I look at all of their conventional medicine labs? Because health coaches don't have access to that information. It's stored in the doctor's portal somewhere. And most of us have probably health data in 3 or 4 portals. So it's even more difficult for the health coach to actually see that information. A lot of the times they're just getting PDF files blasted at them through email, and then they've got to try to piece it all together. So for the coaches, we're going to show you how we stitch all of this information together into one place so that you can look at the big picture.
That's so awesome. You know, and again, it reminds me of one more thing, that because so many things that this software, like in my head, you know, values the end user and it empowers them. Like imagine, oh my gosh, I got my data in a repository, which we talked about. Like I told you before we got on, it's almost like, you know, your storage sites where you can store your extra stuff that you don't have the capacity to. But in this case, it's your health data, and it's your ability in the cloud that no one can get, and it's your ability to empower whoever you want to be able to use the information to make you healthy. I mean, what's wrong with that? But I was under the impression though, so that's health coaches, but you already have for providers, right? I mean, that's different, isn't it? You have like a portal there for providers already?
About the same thing, about anyone who is a provider. You know, for me, provider means conventional medicine. That's the term commonly used. I'm using the word health coach for anyone who's outside the pharmaceutical realm, but in general, it's the same product. And you know, just to pick up on a point you made is that we have users on our system who have way more data on their health than any doctor. And they actually, most people have more data on their iPhone now than the doctor has. So once we start helping people put all this together, now the doctors become consultants. And okay, I want to consult with someone who knows the genetic side. Now I'm going to consult with someone who knows the microbiome side. So we just put people at the hub, and then they can just consult with any expert they choose.
Yeah, it's so amazing. Yeah, it's so great. So that's awesome, man. I thank you so much for your work. So yeah. I always like to ask though. So with the people that I ask, I always ask them at the end of the interview, hey, listen, given what you know now, especially you, I mean, you're what, 52, 53, 60, no, sorry, 42.
Oh, so man, am I really showing my age already, man? Jeepers. I got some work to do.
I was going to say, like, you know, the Canadians, we can like kind of rip on each other, but you know, the Toronto kid always thinks like of the Winnipeg kid as sort of like the sort of like the country folk a little bit, right? I mean, like sort of like the,
totally. Yeah, you know, and you guys are like the snobby big city kids. You know what I mean? So we're opposite ends of the spectrum there, but you know, now
but you can still be like homies, right? Like we're still at the end of the day, we're still like proud, you know, Canadians.
Hey, Canadians, right? So, you know, we're brotherly. So you know, that's the main thing.
Right. So, but so what I do always like to ask is, hey, listen, especially now, what you know, with when you had to take control of your health. And you and I were even talking, I got kind of guessing what your answer will be. What would you tell like old Dave or young Dave that you like that was really suffering, that didn't know all the things that you know now, given it's a great question to ask someone who's in the business of data tracking and making inferences on their health. What would you tell like young Dave, hey, like you need to do this if you want to avoid a broken stress response, if you want to be, you know, very energetic and focused, and you want to be able to just thrive? What would you tell young Dave that you know now that he would take forever to figure out?
Well, the first thing is learning how to regulate your blood sugar. Hands down, no question. And that's learning how to eat foods where your blood sugar is regulated. It's understanding how to adjust your lifestyle, diet, exercise to keep blood sugar in check, making sure you know how to eat a meal that's going to keep you full and keep your blood sugar down below 120, 110 milligrams per deciliter after every meal. And so blood sugar mastery is absolutely number one.
Yeah.
Every freaking disease we have a name for is either directly caused or made worse by dysregulated blood sugar, weight gain.
Yeah, and you know,
etc.
You're 100% right. I'm glad you even said that, because where I find the exhausted, burnt out person is not understanding is it doesn't just come down, because a lot of them are really savvy and a lot of them are already on point with their diet, right? They're already, I'm not gluten-free, I'm gluten-free, I'm dairy-free, I eat well. And okay, we get that, but here's the thing. There's so many other controllers and influencers and impactors of glucose dysregulation. That's cytokines, or in English, inflammation and infections, stress, cortisol release, adrenaline release. If I'm stressed out and I perceive things differently and I get upset that the guy didn't come and deliver my package when he said he could, you know, all those things are going to impact your glucose. And if you don't realize that, and then you have sort of a dopamine fall where I need something, I need something to make me feel good, you interpret that as being hungry. And if I don't eat every 2 hours, I'm going to crash, I'm going to burn, I'm going to die because, I'm hypoglycemic and I don't want to go in a coma if I don't eat in 2 years or 2 hours, that I see people with that all the time. And it's not just about controlling your glucose from what you're eating, which you do have to do. You're right. You have to control all the stuff you said. But making it even harder is you got to control your stress and you got to control your immune system so that your glucose is controlled, right? I mean, would you agree on that?
100%. And I'll take it one step further to say everybody needs to own a glucometer, whether they're diabetic or not. And if you test your blood sugar in the morning and you're out of range high, you're above 100, optimal when you're eating low carb is 85. Get your blood sugar to 85 in the morning before you eat any food. So that's just like, oh, I have a healthy diet, I'm gluten-free, I'm dairy-free. It doesn't matter. Your blood sugar could be skyrocketing after some of the meals. So I'm talking about buying a glucometer and being honest with yourself every morning for a couple weeks. And then you start to learn. And then 1 and 2 hours after your favorite meals. Now that's what I'm talking about with blood sugar regulation. Hard data, absolutely. Glucometer.
Yeah. And that's the stuff that's tracked and starting as we talk on Tuesday about what do you do with that data now. But here's the other thing too is that I get people where I don't get this anymore. I used to. It's like, oh, well, I don't want to, prick my finger. And like, you know what, you're not sick enough for me to help you because you forgot that this is war and that you have to make sure that you are doing your battle cry every day to get healthy. And if that means pricking your finger because you want to have a calibration of what your glucose is saying and what your brain is saying, and their two aren't talking to each other, that requires a finger prick. Totally. Versus, an amputation or, yep. You make the choice. Do a finger prick now or an amputation later.
Yep. So that's definitely my number one for sure would be learning about blood sugar regulation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's awesome. Hey, listen, you said it last time on your podcast that we feel like you've known each other forever. I think we have kind of in that way. And we got a lot in common. And I'm excited to be here for your journey in terms of getting this out there and really changing healthcare and have a paradigm shift in the healthcare model. That's what it is. It starts with awareness and it goes to empowerment. From awareness to empowerment is what it does.
Well, I appreciate that, Joel. And for those who are listening, you and I had a chance to meet in person. I just happened to be in Boca Raton visiting family where you're based. So we had a chance to go out for lunch and the face-to-face connection is always important. Just being able to shake somebody's hand is a big thing. So I'm enjoying our friendship and our collaboration and just super grateful for your support and understanding what we're trying to do and believing in us. So, excuse me, I think we're just at the beginning. So thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And don't forget, like I gave you a gift not to be like hung up on like a treadmill where you put your clothes on and it just uses it to dry. But the brain tap's got to start to be used or I'm going to ask for it back. And that means you get to use it. And it's going to make a huge difference in some of your scores. You watch. It's really cool.
I'll have an update for you on Monday, brother.
All right. Awesome. Well, good talking to you, man. And I look forward to Tuesday, February 26th. We're going to be doing it at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. Central time. And we'll give a bunch of links after this. And we look to see you guys on the call.
Get your popcorn ready.
Take care, bud.
Later, man.